I'm now reading about two planes, 3,000 people, misery in typhoon hit city. When two Philippine Air Force C-130 arrived at the typhoon-wrecked airport here just after dawn Tuesday, more than 3,000 people who had camped out hoping to escape the devastation surged onto the tarmac past a broken iron fence. Only a few hundred made it abroad. The rest were left in a shattered, rain-lashed city short of food and water and littered with uncounted bodies. Just a dozen soldiers and several police held the crowd back. Mothers raised their babies high above their heads in the rain in hopes of being propertized. One woman in her 30s lay on a stretcher, shaking uncontrollably. I was pleading with the soldiers. I was kneeling and begging because I have diabetes, said Helen Cordial, whose house was destroyed in a storm. Do they want me to die in this airport? They are stone-hearted. We need help. Nothing is happening, said Ariston Bellut, an 81-year-old who also didn't get a flight. We haven't eaten since yesterday afternoon. Her clothes were soaked from the rain, and the tears streamed down her face. The struggle at Tacloban's airport is one of countless scenes of misery in the eastern Philippines. Since Typhoon Hanya struck Friday, only a tiny amount of assistance has arrived, and the needs of the nearly 10 million people affected by the disaster are growing ever more urgent. The official death toll from the disaster stood at 1,774 on Tuesday. Local authorities have said they expect that to rise markedly. They fear estimates of 10,000 dead are accurate and might be low. As local authorities struggle to deal with the enormity of the disaster, the United Nations said it had released 25 million in emergency funds and was launching an emergency appeal for money. Tacloban, a city about 22 million people on a Leyte island, bore the full force of the winds and the tsunami-like storms surges. Most of the city is in ruins, a tangled mess of destroyed houses, cars, and trees. Malls, garages, and shops have all been stripped of food and water by hungry residents. More residents spent the night under pouring rain whenever they could, in the ruins of destroyed houses, in the open along roadsides and shredded trees. Some slept under tents brought in by the government of relief groups. Local doctors said they were desperate for medicine. Beside the ruined airport tower, at a small makeshift clinic with shattered windows, Army and Air Force medics said they had treated around 1,000 people since the typhoon for cuts, bruises, lacerations, and deep wounds. It's overwhelming, said Air Force Captain Antonio Tamayo. We need more medicine. We cannot give tetanus vaccine shots because we have none. International aid groups and militaries were rushing assistance to the region, but little has arrived. Government officials and police and army officers have been caught up in the disaster themselves, hampering coordination. The USS George Washington aircraft carrier was expected to arrive off the coast in about 2 days, according to the Pentagon. A similar-sized U.S. ship and its fleet of helicopters capable of dropping tons of water daily and evacuating wounded was credited with saving scores of lives after the 2004 Asian tsunami. The U.S. said it is providing $20 million in immediate aid. Several other countries, including Japan, Britain, and Australia, together have donated tens of millions of dollars. The United Nations said in a statement that its $25 million would be used to pay for emergency shelter, materials, and household items, and for assistance with the provision of emergency health services, safe water supplies, and sanitation facilities. We have developed specialist teams, vital logistics support, and dispatched critical supplies, but we have to do more and faster, said UN humanitarian chief Valerie Amos, who was flying to the country. Joselito Kaimoi, a 42-year-old truck driver, was one of the lucky ones at Tacloban Airport. He was able to get his wife, son, and 3-year-old daughter on a flight out. They embraced in a tearful goodbye, but Kaimoi stayed behind to guard what's left of his home and property. People are just scavenging in the streets. People are asking food from relatives, friends. The devastation is too much. The malls, the grocery stores have all been looted, he said. They are empty. People are hungry, and they cannot control the people. The dead, decomposing and stinking, litter the streets or remain trapped in the debris. As many as 41 provinces were affected by the typhoon, known as Haiyan elsewhere in Asia, but called Yolanda in the Philippines. It was likely the deadliest natural disaster to beset this poor Southeast Asian nation. Authorities said they had evacuated 8 million people ahead of the typhoon, but many evacuation centers proved to be no protection against the wind and rising water. The Philippine National Red Cross, responsible for warning the region and giving advice, said people were not prepared for a storm surge. Imagine America, which was prepared and very rich, still had a lot of challenges at the time of Hurricane Katrina. But what we had was 3 times more than what they received, said Gwendolyn Tang, the group's executive director. Philippine President Benigno Aquino Sr. declared a state of nation calamity, allowing the central government to release emergency funds quicker and impose price controls on staple goods. He said the two worst hit provinces later and summer had witnessed massive destruction and loss of life, but that elsewhere casualties were low. The Philippines, an archipelago nation of more than 7,000 islands, is annually buffeted by tropical storms and typhoons. But Haiyan was an especially large catastrophe. Its winds were among the strongest ever recorded, and it appears to have killed more people than a previous deadliest Philippine storm, Selma, in which about 5,100 people died in the central Philippines in 1991. The country's deadliest disaster on record was the 1976 magnitude 7.9 earthquake that triggered a tsunami in the Moro Gulf in the southern Philippines, killing 5,791 people. Most of the UN and Philippines Foreign Secretary Albert Del Rosario will launch an emergency appeal Tuesday in Manila for aid to help the most 9.8 million people. 9.8 million people affected. The director of UN Humanitarian Operations said. The storm also killed 8 people in southern China and inflicted hundreds of millions of dollars in damage to farming and fishing industries. Chinese state media reported Tuesday. I'm now reading about Iran rejects blame for nuclear tanks and nuclear tanks failure. Iran and Russia on Tuesday blamed friction among world powers for the failure of tanks in Geneva that had come tantalizingly close to a landmark deal on Tehran's nuclear program. The two states dismissed U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry's claim that Iran had balked just as the so-called P5 plus 1 world powers were closing in on a deal to curb Tehran's nuclear activities in return for sanctions relief. The P5+1 was unified on Saturday when we presented our proposal to the Iranians, but Iran couldn't take it. Kerry, who took part in the talks, said in Abu Dubai on Monday. Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif rejected Kerry's comments while alluding to statements by his French counterpart, Laurent Fabius, who has been pilloried in the Iranian media after reports emerged that he had scuppered the potential deal. Mr. Secretary, was it Iran that gutted over half of its U.S. draft Thursday night and publicly commented against it Friday morning? Zarif said on his Twitter account. Zarif spent nearly 7 hours with Kerry in Geneva as both sides worked on a draft text of an agreement. Russia also denied Iran was to blame for the failure to agree on a landmark interim agreement that would have frozen much of Tehran's program while the two sides worked on a comprehensive deal. The draft joint document suited the Iranian side, but since decisions that negotiations are taken by consensus, it was not possible to make a final deal. A foreign ministry source said in comments carried by all Russia's main news agencies. And this was not the fault of the Iranians, the source added, rejecting Kerry's laying of the blame at Iran's door. Such an interpretation simplifies to an extreme and even distorts what happened in Geneva. The source said the Marathon high-profile tank involving Iran and the P5+1, Britain, France, and United States, Russia, and China plus Germany, ended inconclusively early on Sunday. Diplomats insist they are close to a deal, however, and the talks are set to resume in Geneva on November 20 at the lower level of political directors. Fabius joined the talks on Friday and immediately cast doubts on a deal in a statement, saying that while there has been progress, nothing has been agreed yet. The following days he was even less upbeat. There are some points on which we're not satisfied. Fabius told France Inter Radio Saturday morning, citing the extremely prolific Arak nuclear reactor and the question of uranium enrichment. The heavy water reactor being built in Iraq is a source of concern for Western powers because it produces plutonium as a byproduct, potentially offering another route to an atomic weapon. Tehran has repeatedly denied it is seeking nuclear weapons. Iran, U.S. tried to ease Gulf concerns. Zarif echoed the Gulf optimism late Monday, saying substantive progress has been made in Ghanawa over the weekend and that a deal was still within reach. But he cautioned Kerry that putting a spin on the reality doesn't help generate trust in the negotiation process. It suggested Kerry's remarks in Abu Dhabi were intended to allay concerns of the hosting country, referring to unease among Gulf states who view Iran as a rival regional power. Saudi Arabia and its Gulf neighbors have long feared a diplomatic breakthrough could lead to a full U.S.-Iranian rapprochement that could upend their long-time military alliance with the United States. Zarif tried to ease their concerns, insisted that the negotiations were only on the nuclear issue and not on relations with the United States, adding that he had instructed his ambassadors in the region to garner the support of our brothers in the Persian Gulf for an accord. Israel, the sole if undeclared nuclear power in the Middle East, sees Tehran nuclear ambitions as a threat to its existence, and is strongly opposed to any deal that would not dramatically scale back the program. The United States and Israel have both repeatedly warned they will take military action if necessary to prevent Iran from becoming a nuclear-armed state. I'm now reading about Metaside is Health Overhaul's early success story. The underdog of government health care program is emerging as a rare early success story of President Barack Obama's technologically challenged health overhaul. Often dismissed, Metaside has signed up $444,000 people in 10 states in the 6 weeks since open enrollment began, according to Avalier Health, a market analyst firm that compiled data from those states. 25 states are expanding their Metaside programs, but data for all of them was not available. Meanwhile, private plans offered through troublesome online markets are expected to have enrolled a much smaller number of people. The Obama administration plans to release October enrollment statistics this week, but publicly, but publicly, but publicly, but publicly, but public, but publicly available figures already provide a contrast between a robust start for Medicaid expansion and lukewarm early sign-ups for new government subsidized private plans offered separately under the law. Medicaid is exceeding expectations in most places, said Dan Mendelsohn, Availor's president. It is definitely a bright picture in states that have chosen to expand. A big reason for the disparity in 36 states, the new private plans are being offered through a malfunctioning federal website that continues to confound potential customers. Instead, run websites have not been uniformly glitch-free. Obama's health care law melded to approaches to advance its goal of broader insurance coverage. Middle-class people with no access to job-based coverage are offered subsidized private plans, while low-income people are steered to an expanded version of Medicaid in states accepting it. Starting January 1st, the law expands Medicaid eligibility to those with incomes up to 138% of the federal poverty level. 15,856 for an individual, or 32,499 for a family of four. The Supreme Court gave states the right to opt out of the expansion, which is fully financed by Washington for the first 3 years, gradually phasing down to a 90% federal share. At present, 25 states and the District of Columbia have accepted the Medicaid expansion, which is strongly supported by the state hospital associations, medical groups, and advocates for the poor. Its main beneficiaries are expected to be low-income adults with no children living at home,